GitHub is similar. It's here, 35–40%, technically around the world, but the majority in the North American time zones. I'm happy to talk about anything. I have a couple of points that I think would be fun to talk about, but again, I'm a little unprepared, but happy to go into detail. But I thought I'd hit a couple of key things. First is, we originally titled this, Remote to the Future. I would say remote is the present because I think every company out there, no matter where you work, is a distributed company. I like to joke that Salesforce has however many buildings in this city. But every time I wanted to go to a Salesforce meeting, it didn't matter where it was, I was on video. I was on video in our office, I was on video in some other Salesforce offices, talking to somebody else either here or in Seattle or 2 floors up. But they're all basically a distributed company. And the irony was, no one seemed to think that way. I think it's all people locally in the office. But all the things that caused friction in the teams were all the things that basically weren't recognized if you were a local company masquerading, or a distributed company masquerading as a local company. And you write things down, you got water cooler talks so they get things done. And a lot of things that you take for granted in a very small company, in a large company just will fall on the floor. So I think that if every company approached work as a distributed company, even if there's 5 people local, you're going to have a lot better results. So let me give you a couple of things that I think are really important to remote companies, remote cultures. First, I think is hiring. Who you look for and the type of profile of person you look for. And the most important thing I think you need to impress upon people when you're hiring them in a remote workforce is you're going to have to pick up the phone and get on video more than you think you will. Most people think that Slack solves the problem or whatever chat communication tool solves the problem. It really doesn't. That's really great for gifts, honestly. But you have to jump into video more often than you think you do. The higher up you go in an organization, the more you have to do this. And I think it's really important to tell people that in a distributed organization, that is an incredibly important thing. To feel comfortable talking to people. It's weird to say, talking to people, but it's something you have to impress. Because of that, I think you have to look at people who know closer. I think because of that, you have to look for people who have good communication skills or are willing to learn good communication skills. Now, this does not mean someone who is articulate or has great grammar and writing, but it just means that they understand communication is an important protocol in building software. That includes writing things down. That includes asking questions as opposed to assuming a whole lot of stuff. And that includes usually saying, I don't think I understand what that person meant by this. I will ask them instead of, I think I know what that person meant, and I'm going to vigorously disagree with them. That last point is something that I can't stress enough in a remote environment, that if you think you disagree with somebody, assume you misheard them and ask the question more, and 90% of all conflict will go away. Guarantee you, just give it a try. The thing I think that is hardest for most people, if you're an IC in an organization that is distributed, is to trust that the rest of the organization is doing the same things that you hope that they're doing. And if you're a leader or a manager in the organization, it's extending trust to the remote people that they're doing what they are supposed to be doing. And when I see remote cultures, remote organizations fail the most is when people start to not trust other people. And this is probably the biggest reason why I don't think we see more distributed remote work is that most people think that if someone's in the office, I know that they're doing work, which we all know is not true. But if you can't see somebody, then how do you know? That's the question. How do you know that they're working? Well, I don't have any idea how much somebody in my office is actually working. Just by seeing them in the office, you have to find other ways and other mechanisms to do this. And this is on leadership. This is on leadership to find different ways to be productive, or to measure productivity of your organization. And it's obviously not lines of code, it's not PRs, it's not check-ins. But it's usually output of a system, and you have to find a system that is for your organization to do that. And that, when when people don't trust each other to do those right things, the entire organization is going to start having these weird, chaotic kind of moments where you start to see it break down in weird and kind of gnarly ways. You see, private Slack channels pop up all the time. You see these little tiny pockets of people talking over here or over here, and you see, basically in a distributed way, you see tribes start to form as well. And I think that that's an incredibly, obviously dangerous thing to guard against, but it's also usually in any organization, but particularly a distributed one, it's hard to know that it's happening until it's too late. So the last point that I would make that distributed organizations need a lot of is really, really solid managers. People who are making an effort to connect with their ICs, the other managers, the other directors, and making sure that things are actually on track. If you're not doing this on a regular basis, it's very easy to vectorially drift from each other, whether it's one team or several engineers on the team. And drift in any organization is, at best it's a waste of time, and at worst it's just toxic. But in a distributed one, particularly if you have a span of time zones, you'll start to see drift in weird ways. So, to sum that up, you have to find communication, people can communicate, communication protocol. You got to trust, you got to build trust, and you got to find ways to measure the output of your systems, and you have to really spend time on management. And I don't mean this in a, hey, are you doing your job? Are you checking in? All that sort of stuff. It's no, it's you have what you need. How's it going? What's, I'm hearing you say this, and then I'm hearing this person say this. That doesn't sound right. Let's jump on a video. Let's make sure that happens. So, that's a couple of quick summaries of things. Two things I'd like to say more about distributed work. One is, I think that the pros of distributed work far outweigh the cons, otherwise I would not be an advocate for it. And I've been doing this for over 10 years. I've been an executive, remote executive for over 10 years as well. I started in, when I moved from Arizona to the middle of nowhere, Australia, to do it at Canonical. At Heroku, I did it out of Victoria, British Columbia, and I still live in Victoria, and I'm doing that for GitHub. I'm a huge believer in it, and I think it's honestly the way that the future world is going to work. The open source world already works this way, but we in Silicon Valley, as forward-thinking tech leaders and tech companies, for some reason have not fully embraced this yet, and I'm not really sure why. I think it really has to do with trust. I believe it to be the future, but I think that there's a whole bunch of reasons that it's not going to be adopted very quickly. But the pros far outweigh the cons. Now, the cons, though, are lengthy, and I think that's the challenge, is that the cons in these are things that you have to consciously work against and make sure that you are addressing. But some of the biggest cons to doing distributed work are basically things that you wouldn't see in an unhealthy organization anyway. So if you're addressing them, you are typically a healthy organization. And it takes a really brave person, I think, to actually say, we're going to go fully distributed. Or a really forward-thinking person to say, we're going to go fully distributed. Or maybe sometimes just a really naive person to say, we're just going to fight the machine. But I do believe that when you do it and you adopt it, you're going to reap a whole bunch of benefits. The primary one that I see that you're going to be able to reap is that you're going to be able to hire incredibly talented people that are not in your same geo. I think it's really kind of silly, even though we're sitting in the mecca of tech, to think, it's kind of egotistical in many ways, that this is the only place where really smart tech people are. And not only that, I think it's, we talk about D&I and tech a lot. I think it's a travesty to think that we're going to solve all the problems and we're not going to look past a whole bunch of this stuff here. How many people have been following all the San Francisco real estate stuff? I'm sure everyone here, if you're local, has ridiculous rents or mortgages. How many people are trying to leave San Francisco to buy a house or to have a mortgage or have a family? I mean, it happens. Everyone's getting priced out of this market. And I joke, at this point I'm 41 years old. I walk around San Francisco and, dear God, I feel freaking old. I don't know what the average age of someone walking on the street in San Francisco is, but maybe I'm just starting to drift from my 20s that far, but it doesn't seem that there's a lot of people in their 40s. And if you are in your 40s or 50s, it seems like you're driving around with a chauffeur or in a private helicopter or something like that. It seems like you've actually hit a certain stage of life as well. And I think that it's important to recognize, you know, we want a family, 1 or 2 kids. It's going to be difficult out here. It's going to be incredibly difficult to do that as the price of this place gets worse. I mean, what was the resolution? The mayor that got elected? Again, we're getting a report. I should not start talking about this too deeply, but I think it's, again, myopic to think that, okay, all that's going to happen here. And so, you know, I think distributed is the future. I think there are many tech leaders out there are many tech companies, there are many people in the industry who like to think of themselves as forward-looking. They tend to be on the technology side. I think this is one optimization that many organizations can make that is one of the more fruitful for them over time. Particularly because if you get good, as I said earlier, at distributed and remote work, your organization is likely going to be much, much healthier in general. The last point I'm going to make about distributed work. If you're going to do it, I suggest you do it early. It's much harder to put it in later. The larger you get, the harder it's going to be to change cultural patterns and practices. If you're a 2-person startup, it's much easier. If you're all in one building right now and you're several hundred people, it's harder to put it in. But that is also true for any real practice in the industry. It's much harder to put in new build systems or new engineering practices or new cultural elements into any organization that is growing or of a certain size. So if you are much larger or you are of a different scale, I suggest you don't do it en masse, but you find pockets that you're going to experiment with it and learn about it, and or a small team's going to do it. But that's, you know, a concept that is generally applicable to all of engineering in general, which is don't try to do something for the entire organization. Try to experiment with it over on the side first before you figure out if it's going to work for everybody. So, yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, but honestly, I haven't slept more than 4 hours in about 8 weeks. So, I figured I'd probably just stop, answer some questions at this point about remote work, not about the acquisition. Yeah.
Waiting microphone or?
Yeah, so I think someone would have pass on a microphone on this side, the other side.
Testing. What are some signs in an organization that there is not enough communication amongst the distributed teams or between local and distributed? What are some things that you look for and then start to fix?
Well, you asked specifically about versus distributed, or do you just mean between teams in general? Because the local and distributed is actually an interesting point.
Yeah, that. So hub and spokes.
So typically, if you're going to do a hub and spoke model, you're probably going to experiment with, I have a portion of my team, maybe local, that's the core, and distributed, they're working on some periphery portion of the system or some other product. And at that point, depends on what kind of architecture you have too, you're probably figuring out that there's other APIs between them or how they're communicating. But the easiest sign to see is obviously at the managerial level whether or not the projects are on track, if there's drift in expectations, if you're hearing a couple of things that are wrong or off from what you would expect. Though I would wager too, if you are asking that question, you might not have processes or systems that allow you to know if something like that is happening. So like any good engineering system, you want to tighten feedback loops to figure out how far off or on track you are. And if you're working on a project and you have 6-week cadence or 6-month cadence, you're likely going to have a lot of drift somewhere in between there. Doesn't matter local, doesn't matter remote, doesn't matter whatever. But in a distributed system with our distributed company, you're probably going to want to make sure that you have tighter feedback loops. Stand-ups every day, planning on a Monday, demo on a Friday. The most amount of drift you're going to get is a week. Largely, maybe a couple of someone's on vacation, but you're trying to tighten out how much that drift is going to be there. But the signs are basically that somebody assumed a certain thing and expressed it wherever it be, whether it's in a wiki or whether it's in a PR, or whether it's in an email saying, I thought we had one of these things. And that's usually the most clear signal. So look for any word that matches, I thought we talked about this, and I'm assuming something, and you're assuming something else.
Sorry, I'll pass the mic to you. Just grabbed it to ask the question. So I've been managing distributed teams for a while, and one challenge I haven't really figured out how to solve exactly is how to turn a team of individuals into an actual team of people who are not just 5 or 7 separate open source luminaries, for example.
So I don't think that's any different in a distributed or local context. I think it's the tools that you're going to use might be slightly different, but you're still conceptually going to, you're conceptually going to go about it the same way, which is, I believe that individuals and teams, the biggest difference between them is that teams understand this as a shared context or goal set, and they all fully, or not fully, that's never going to be the case, are majority aligned on some objective. And if a team of 5 or 7, at least 80% Venn diagram overlap would agree on a mission, it's very likely that they will come together as a team, still with some more work on the individual levels, make sure that they're connecting and whatnot. But if you don't have shared context, mission, or vision, there's almost zero chance that you're going to feel like a team. So start there. But also make sure that individuals themselves, not just IC to manager or manager to superior are having one-on-ones, but teams themselves, the team members themselves are having one-on-ones. And they're having team meetings and stand-ups and retrospectives and all those healthy things. And then encourage a whole bunch of shared team activity type of stuff. Find a personal connection with every member of the team. My thing is I like to know about spouses, partners, children, hobbies, dogs, cats, all that sort of stuff, where they grew up, favorite sports, so kind of like all the personal stuff that has not work related. And I try to know that about almost everyone in the company. I mean, I tend to work, I won't know that about everyone at Microsoft. But I really do try to connect with everybody on an individual level so that I, at least when I'm having my one-on-one conversation, I can reference something that we might share, because we all share something. We all have a shared X, Y, or Z somewhere. And if you can find that, you're going to be able to make that connection. So I would encourage them to do that. I think one of the biggest things I see in almost all teams, and weirdly I see this in executive management teams the most, is that they don't have one-on-ones. They don't talk to each other. I say the worst time to introduce yourself to your neighbor is when your house is on fire. Build that relationship ahead of time so that you can go to them and say, okay, this is one of these gingerbread conversations. That's our code word for, oh shit, everything's burning down. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? I'm scared. So do that.
So how much time do you bring your teams together? So here you are in San Francisco, and this is not where you live.
It's true.
And I've seen you now 3 times, maybe 4 in San Francisco. So you're here a fair amount of time. How much time do you bring your teams together in order to facilitate?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a level of communication that happens person to person that's really different from Slack or even video.
That's true. So I do encourage distributed teams to get together X to Y times per year. Now X and Y, they're going to be very dependent on a lot of different circumstances, whether how distributed you are, how big you are, what's your funding level, what's your run rate, all of those sorts of things. And I think the bare minimum is 1. The maximum, typically for a lot of different reasons, I would suggest to be once a quarter. So that's usually 1 to 4. Some people travel more, some people like to travel, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people, the reason why they're doing it is they don't like to do it. So you have to find some mechanisms that support that. Now, myself, I travel quite a bit. I do, and I've always have. The reason why I do is because I'm typically the head of the organization. I might be one of the only remote executives, which is an odd thing in a lot of these cases. And I like to say that I need to manage my own weird my weird in the executive realm is that I'm remote, but I'm doing it so that the rest of my team doesn't have to. And that's the way I look at that, is I'm paying down a remote tax to make sure that I am the one facilitating the conversations with the rest of the organization, make sure that we're aligned, so that I can do that for my folks, so that my directs or their managers don't have to travel. So I do travel more than I would recommend regular manager or IC to travel, and that is what it is, I guess, in my case. Luckily, I'm only an hour and a half flight from San Francisco. I also think that managers themselves might want to travel a little bit more than 4 times a year if they want to go with other teams on sites. But this is also something where I think logistically you're going to want to get creative. If you're going to be doing on-sites for one team, you might want to see if you can do on-sites for a couple of teams at the same time. I do suggest that when people do on-sites, they try to make it to HQ or some central location more than some random location, because then you can overlap with whether or not people are in HQ or other teams coming. Now, I guess I've seen this, and I recommend highly against this, given that I've seen this happen, and it usually seems to go into a boondoggle sort of way. But most distributed teams say, hey, we're distributed, we don't need to go to HQ to meet up. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Hawaii. Let's go to Tahiti. Let's go to Boise, Idaho. No one actually chooses to go to Boise. But they just go to some place that's not a local co-location or a central location. And that serves one purpose of getting the team together, but it doesn't have knock-on effect. And if you're distributed and you're remote, I think you want to try to get as much overlap in upside as you possibly can. So that's why I encourage all remote teams and people, if you're going to come to GitHub, you come to HQ. It's usually more expensive to come to San Francisco, but you're going to see the local people. You're probably going to see several other remote teams that are here as well. You're going to have a lot more face time with folks. I'm going to go back here first.
So one of the challenges that I have seen with the remote teams is how do you manage the growth expectations of the team members, and especially when you don't have a lot of face time with them. Maybe you can visit probably once in a quarter or so, but still you didn't get to realize what they are what they need and what they want throughout the year. So how do you manage that part of it?
I don't know that it's any different than being local. I think maybe because I've been doing this for 10 years, I'm so comfortable on a phone or on video that you have to learn to read body language over video just as much as you would in person. Now it's harder. Sometimes it's just the head or to here. You have to look more for the facial expressions than you do with the body language. But I don't think it's that different than local people. You have to know which questions to ask, and hopefully they're answering the questions truthfully because you have trust with that person, so you can do that. But I don't really think it's that different. So if you know how to grow somebody locally, assume that you know how to grow somebody remote, and just figure out how you get to that person to trust you to tell you actually what they want, and know how to read that they are, in fact, maybe hiding something or not being fully truthful for whatever reason, and get to that point. Which incredibly sounds like an unsatisfying answer to your question, but people are people at the end of the day, in my opinion. It doesn't matter if I'm here and somebody's in New York. Yeah, you gotta get good at that. One thing, let me give you a couple things that I've done personally for myself I've noticed. I noticed that when I am thinking, someone called me out on this a long time ago, when I'm thinking, I tend to look down at the floor, my face drops, and whatever forced smile I have goes away. So if you see me up here speaking, everything I'm doing with my face and my hands tends to be very intentional. I've actually gone and practiced in front of the mirror, which is a super uncomfortable thing. To talk to yourself in front of a mirror, but I'm trying to express a lot more emotion with my body and my face than I normally think I would have to do. But in remote, it actually goes a long way, because this is like one of the pains that people look at and have to use. So I do this a lot because I don't ever want to be misunderstood. I want someone to know when I'm angry, or when I'm disappointed, or when I'm just thinking and I look really, really, I don't know, angry or disturbed, but it's just the way my face looks. Yeah, my wife does not like that. She says, if I'm thinking, it just looks like I'm really surly, and the kids are like, why daddy mad? But I think it's important that you kind of set that example too, and encourage, like, hey, find some frameworks that you can use to parse through this. That sounded a little different than I was expecting. Am I misreading this? Because what I heard was, and then you know, typical management stuff, but you probably have to do that a little bit more until you break that wall down.
I'll go follow on to that question. So one of the things that's missing is management by walking around. We don't bump into your staff. So we don't bump into our staff when we've got a remote staff. We don't get management by walking around. What do you substitute for that? So that what your answer was, we can have the same meetings, but we don't have the same bumping into each other.
Yeah, and then I saw your hand go over there. You know, no one likes forced fun. But management while walking around tends to be what I call lazy management. But I want to get all management to be more intentional. So have the programs, the scheduled meetings with people. Don't try to cancel don't cancel one-on-ones, we all get busy. But the advantage to management by running around is that, oh, I forgot we're supposed to talk about that. Or, you know, I'm going to need to catch up with you, can you ping me later type of thing. I usually like to say that there's like, I have three protocols that you can get me on. It's like Slack, it's text, or it's video, or phone. Slack me if you just need to remind me, text me if something's on fire, and video for, or call if it's like quite literally urgent. Usually a board member needs something. To me, the management while walking around is the Slack. It's the, hey, you there, I forgot to do this, remind me to come, you know, in our one-on-one, that type of thing. It's not as satisfying, but you learn to make that work. The open source world's been doing this for the last 25 years on IRC. Essentially, management walking around is just having one big lobby. People kind of go in there and they break off into different protocols. So, I promise over here.
Hi, Jason. What would you say the biggest challenge an engineer on a distributed team faces, and what are you doing to solve it?
So I think the biggest thing of being distributed yourself is not knowing all the other people, particularly if some organization is growing incredibly fast, you don't know the people. But you don't know what they look like, you tend not to know, and pictures tend to tell a terrible story about people. You know, to any directory of somebody's face, if you all take out your licenses and look at them, how many of us look like our licenses anymore? And I think that knowing all the other people, or recognizing them, or seeing them in the office, or seeing them online, kind of being able to quickly figure out who they are, that's the hardest thing. So I don't think there's any real way to solve this other than talking to them still and interacting with them, because you can try different modes, you can try directories, you can try email chains, introducing yourself, but we all have short memories on these things. It's not.
Can I have your attention? Can I have your attention, please? Today, we will be conducting a test of the life safety system.
Which we don't have remote.
Disregard any flashing the strobes, closing the doors where the audio is secure. It's only a test. It's only a test.
So.
Thanks. I have a team of 8 people right here. I have a team of 8 people, 5 people located here and 2 in Seattle and 1 in Austin. I always get complaints from the people in Seattle and Austin that there are spontaneous discussions that are happening in the office here, which I would have liked to participate in, at least hear and learn from. So how do you avoid these kinds of issues? And is that my own issue, or is it something that's common across the board?
No, that's common. And I think this is the hardest thing in distributed and remote, is if you have HQ or some center of gravity, and then other people that are distributed, particularly if it's unequally oriented. If you have more people local than you have distributed, that tends to happen more. And the only two things that I think solve this are, wait, this sounds really important, let's grab X, Y, or Z and put them on a call. We have to go into a room and do that. Or we need to make this decision really quickly, or we need to have this, and then we go immediately and write it down in whatever system that you have to write it down, and that captures the notes, whether it's a bulletin board or a wiki of some sort. Failing those two things, I think that people have a right to complain about that happening, because they are effectively cut out of information sharing context that is probably needed for them. And it's unfair for us, if we're local, to do that to them, because we're depriving them of information that they're likely needing to do their job. And the other is they definitely would feel like second-class citizens in a model like that. So I think you have to almost over-orient to that, which is odd. Like, there's 3 people here and 1 person out, and we want to have a quick conversation. The discipline to jump in a room and start an impromptu video call with that person is important in that case. And then it might become habit. Okay, a lot of shout out over there. I'll go here.
What is more of a joint problem? Having local people force them to work when they don't think home or something, or nearly force them to experience with such a meeting with one person.
That's a good point.
So I think that you actually mitigate that from my experience.
That's a good point and a good reminder. When I was at, right before actually I joined Heroku, they were having some challenges in a distributed organization, and what they decided to do was they were going to do 2 weeks everybody at home. So if you're local, you're not coming into the office. It didn't solve the problems, but at least increase the empathy that the local people had for remote work, and also showed them that you do have to jump on Slack, or you have to jump on whatever video. It gave them some more confidence in that. So, but the 1 day a week is actually a really interesting one too. So I like that.
So let's take 2 more questions, each on one side, and then we'll wrap up for a panel. I think Jason might stay after this. We can have a chance to ask more questions. And so over here.
So my question is, how do you keep remote teams motivated? Because one of the things I keep seeing is that there's an HQ, a culture shown, people feel they're part of something, but somehow this changes with remote teams. That's my experience at least. So you already mentioned on and off that you do one-on-ones and a lot of more effort, but do you think this is like a management decision to actually tackle that, or it's just leadership and how they communicate with everyone?
I'm not sure on that last question, but I would say if we try to keep some teams motivated, 2 data points real quick before I answer that question. When we were at Heroku and then at GitHub, we do surveys of all of our employees and try to figure out how they're feeling about work. And when we were at Heroku, we thought, before we did the first one, that people who were remote were going to have a worse work experience, or perceived work experience, I should say, than locals. But when we got the survey results back, it said that the locals were, I'm going to make up some numbers, like 65% satisfied with their job, but the remotes were like 75% satisfied with their job. All things considered, all things in, which was kind of shocking to us when we looked at the results. We said that is exactly the opposite of what we thought would be the case. And it's the same thing at GitHub. And there's a lot of different reasons why we could probably ascribe to that, though it's interesting because I think a lot of us assume, and I have done this myself, I've assumed that the local people would be more engaged or feel more satisfied with their work, but in fact a lot of the remotes do. We might all complain about the same things, or loudly or more vigorously, because we all like different things. And, but I think it's the thing to do with those folks is just to engage with them. Now, how do you keep remote teams specifically motivated? I don't think that's, again, dissimilar than local teams. I think that you have to give them really hard challenges. You have to set them up for success with leadership and management around them. Give them rails that you can do, by which they can be successful, and praise when they're successful and help when they're not. That's basics of leadership and management, but I don't think it's local versus remote. Now I think that when a fully remote team goes a little bit off the rails, it's a little harder pull back on the rails than a local team, because for some reason, local teams, once you get them all together, no one really wants to be passive aggressive in front of each other. But in a remote, if you jump into Slack, you do it all on text or IRC, people tend to get snarky or passive aggressive that way, or PRs or something like that. So if you're going to do it with a remote team, jump on video really quickly, because no one really wants to be that way with face-to-face.
That's like your name before, right? Do you do your performance and comp reviews in person, or do you go remote as well?
We do wherever the person is. So I have a whole bunch of local people, and I have a whole bunch of remote people that report to me, and wherever I am, I'll do the one-on-one with them or the performance review.
So I was wondering if you feel like this is one size fits all, or is a remote solution, distributed solution more appropriate if certain disciplines, others, or certain types of work industries and others?
I haven't thought about that. Sorry? Oh, do I think it's appropriate, a one-size-fits-all appropriate in all industries or disciplines or other factors, I guess I would say. Like, I mean, let's say there's a couple different ways you can read that. Should marketing be all local or remote? Can marketing do exec and engineering and sales? What about healthcare, finance? If you go verticals that way, consider it. I don't think it matters from the industry except for physical. If you need to be physically present in something, it's going to be very, obviously it's impossible to do that. So, but in all software, I don't think it's there's any challenge in it. I don't think that the field matters. Interestingly, most sales organizations are distributed. You might have the head of or somebody in HQ, but usually have regional managers, usually have people all over the globe already. So sales organizations are largely distributed anyway. And then what happens is a lot of teams, like design teams, like to be co-located in an office for whiteboard reasons. But there's a lot of tools out there that are making all disciplines, I think, in modern tech companies distributed capable. So I don't really think it matters. I think it has to do with the individuals and the team and the company and the team and how disciplined they are.
So let's take this as really the last question. I know I have a lot of questions.
One more.
If you're going to start out with remote teams for the first time, is it better to start with a remote manager who manages ICs, or be the manager that manages remote ICs?
I'm person. So is it better to start, I think your question was, is it better, if you're going to start, is it better to start with someone who's been remote themselves or a manager who's going to?
Thank you. You're going to start working with remote teams. Is it easier to be the manager, let's say in San Francisco, that manages remote ICs, engineers, or go ahead and hire a remote manager who then manages local engineers? Which one has less potential for breakdown communication, better teamwork, etc.?
I want to say it doesn't matter, but in this case I actually think it does, likely. I think that it's probably better to have everybody be distributed, and if you have one person who's in HQ and all the engineers, let's say, are distributed, you're effectively a fully distributed team at that point. And I think in that case, that is a better model. If everybody is on equal footing and fully distributed, I think that's better than having one set of folks over here and then one person on site. Even if it's manager IC, it's flipped. There's too much friction, I think, in that scenario.
All right, let's give a round of applause to today's panel. Thank you very much. Even though we have so many questions, I probably think we should have a second event for teams sometime in the next few months.